The first thing I did after being reborn was to destroy the marriage application with Ethan Walker. In my previous life, to help him attend college, I gave up my spot for him, abandoning my dreams. I devoted myself to raising our children, caring for his aging parents, and supporting his career. Yet, all I got in return was his cold remark, "You're nothing but a housewife who wastes money." How could you compare to Emily Carter? Emily, the unattainable love of his life, was his white moonlight, the woman he idolized but could never have. Even our children, influenced by his disdain for me, saw me as unremarkable and unworthy of respect. On my deathbed, when I called them for help, they ignored me, too busy celebrating Emily's birthday. Now, in this new life, just as I was agonizing over how to destroy the marriage application, Ethan appeared with it in his hand, right in front of me. He burned it to ashes, his gaze full of contempt. "I've never loved you," he said coldly. "I can't marry you out of guilt toward your parents." He had been reborn as well. "Anna, don't do this." Uncle White's familiar voice woke me from my thoughts. His face was full of worry. "How can you give your college spot to Ethan? Your parents made such great sacrifices, and they would be heartbroken to see you throw away your future." His words pulled me back to reality. I looked down at my young, tender hands, and warmth surged through me. My eyes filled with tears. I was reborn. I quickly took the college admission documents from Uncle White and shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "I won't give it away. I'll go to college myself." In my previous life, I had dreamed of achieving something significant in medicine, of contributing even a little to advancing healthcare. But I foolishly gave up my dream, giving Ethan my spot so he could attend college instead. On my way home, I clutched the admission documents tightly against my chest, wrapped in my clothes, as if afraid to lose them again. In my past life, after marrying Ethan, I moved to his hometown to care for his elderly parents. I worked tirelessly, even grinding tofu at dawn to earn money to support him while he studied. When our first son was born, Ethan was still in college, and the entire family relied on me for survival. After Ethan graduated and quickly climbed the ranks in the military, he brought me and our son to live on base. But even then, he never stopped belittling me. Whenever people compared me to Emily, he would mock me. "She's just a housewife who spends money. How could she ever compare to Emily?" Without my parents to protect me, I endured his mistreatment while raising our 2 children. Even they eventually looked down on me, thinking I was no match for Emily in terms of intelligence, culture, or appearance. Years of hard labor took a toll on my health. When I fainted from low blood sugar and called them for help, they dismissed me, saying, "Don't ruin Emily's birthday with your nonsense." Left alone in a sealed room with a gas leak, I suffocated to death. I smiled bitterly, my heart filled with determination. In this life, I will no longer live for others. I will live for myself. For now, I had reclaimed the college spot that was rightfully mine. But figuring out a suitable way to destroy the marriage application with Ethan was proving to be a challenge. Back then, I didn't know Ethan well. He was diligent and often helped my father with errands. My father, impressed by his hard work, took him under his wing. Being young and naive, I gradually developed feelings for him as he was always by my side when my parents were busy. Later, when my parents were ambushed, my mother was fatally injured, and my father sacrificed himself to shield Ethan from harm. Before he died, my father, knowing I had feelings for Ethan, entrusted me to him. In my previous life, Ethan repaid that debt by turning my life into a nightmare. He once said, "Your father only treated me as a servant." Yet his death made it seem like I owed him some monumental favor. He didn't sacrifice himself to save me out of kindness. He only wanted to accompany your mother in death. He just acted noble by saving me so I'd keep working for you, binding me to you all these years. I'll never forget the resentment and unwillingness in his eyes at that moment. No matter what, I was determined to destroy the marriage application between me and Ethan Walker. After carefully hiding the college admission letter in my belongings, I pushed open the door, only to see Ethan sitting inside with the marriage application in his hand, waiting for me. As soon as I stepped inside, before I could say anything, he cut me off, speaking impatiently. "I've thought it through. This report can't be submitted. I can't marry you. I stared at him, stunned. His voice was calm, devoid of emotion, as though he'd been mulling over this decision for years and had already resolved himself to it. His furrowed brows and occasional glances in my direction were filled with disdain, as if even looking at me was an unbearable chore. His expression was so detached that I was momentarily transported years into the future, seeing the same aloofness in his eyes as he stood with his back to me. His voice cold and resolute. "Let me be honest with you. I've never loved you. I can't marry you out of guilt toward your father." Then, with a grave tone, he repeated, "And let me make it clear. I don't think I owe your father anything." My eyes widened in disbelief. This level of bluntness and clarity wasn't something the Ethan of this age could express. A realization hit me. He might have been reborn, just like me. Without hesitation, I snatched the marriage application from his hand. Under his shocked gaze, I tore it in half, then folded the pieces repeatedly until they were small enough to shred further into tiny fragments. Watching the torn pieces scatter to the ground, I felt an indescribable sense of relief. I had finally destroyed the chains that had bound me in my previous life. Looking at him, I said evenly, "Ethan, I never really wanted to marry you either. My father might have cared for you, but that was his choice, not mine." After speaking, I stepped into my room and locked the door. The first part of what I said was a lie, a reflection of how I felt now after being reborn. Not something my younger self would have said so calmly, but the second part was true. My father had genuinely cared for him, considering him in his final moments, but none of that mattered anymore. I hurriedly began packing, a sense of urgency driving me like never before. I'd already decided to move out and rent a small place in South Alley. I planned to sell tofu during the day and study at night. Though my parents had left me a dowry, it wasn't enough to cover all my college expenses, let alone my dream of studying medicine abroad. I thought of my aunt, who lived overseas, in my previous life. When she found out I'd given up my college spot for someone else, she was furious. She had planned to send me abroad to study, but by then, I was already married to Ethan and refused her offer. Before hanging up, she had said, "Depending on a man is not a good way out." After that, we lost contact, as I was too consumed with housework to reach out to her again. Now, with the clarity of another life, I realized how right she was. I finished packing and prepared to leave, fully intending to ignore Ethan. But just as I was about to step out, he called after me. "Anna Summers," he said coldly, "I know you're alone now, without your parents. Ever since they passed, I've sheltered you and taken care of you. Let's be honest. I owe you nothing. When you leave, remember to keep your mouth shut." I froze for a moment, then couldn't help but laugh. Sheltered me? This house was my father's home before he died. If it weren't for the fact that I didn't want to entangle myself with him any further or drag out this connection to my past, he wouldn't even have the right to argue over this place. As for taking care of me, I was the one doing the cooking, cleaning, and maintaining the household. Even though I had no parents, I wasn't entirely alone. This military base was filled with my parents' old friends. I didn't need Ethan to survive. In fact, in my previous life, part of his smooth rise through the military ranks might have been thanks to my parents' influence. I smiled faintly. I had wasted an entire lifetime with him, and I had no intention of wasting another second. Still, I replied carefully, "That depends. Just don't provoke me again." Then I walked out, never looking back. My best friend, Mia Bennett, was in the same cultural troupe as Emily Carter. According to her, the very day I moved out, Ethan Walker couldn't wait to confess his feelings to Emily. Mia stormed into my place, fuming. "You won't believe it." Emily was practically gloating. "She even told me you're nothing but a servant girl, destined to have no luck in life, which is why you couldn't hold on to someone as promising as Ethan. They're all laughing at you, saying you lack vision. Ethan's about to be a college student, and even Commander Lee sees a bright future for him. And yet, you chose this moment to dump him? They're saying you'll regret it for the rest of your life." She stomped around my small space, her frustration palpable. These people have no idea what they're talking about. Dumped him? As if Ethan's the one who's ungrateful and treacherous. I interrupted her rant with a calm smile, pulling her to sit down. "Mia, Do you know what time it is? She blinked, caught off guard. What? It's the era of rapid national development. I said firmly. Millions of people like us are small cogs driving this progress. The more time I waste on meaningless distractions, the less time I have to study, and the slower my journey toward advancing medicine becomes. Mia threw her hands up in frustration. But Ethan twisted the truth. People actually think you dumped him. Doesn't that make you angry? I looked at her, my gaze unwavering. Compared to my aspirations, Ethan and Emily mean nothing. I don't want anything to do with them, now or in the future. I took out my college admission letter and explained everything to Mia. From how I earned the spot to why I had originally considered giving it up. Only then did she calm down. I urged her to keep it quiet until everything settled. And she nodded. Finally, she burst into laughter. Emily and Ethan are dreaming big right now. I'd love to see their faces when they wake up to reality. That wake-up call came sooner than expected. Uncle White, unable to tolerate Ethan and Emily slandering me, and turning me into a joke within the military community, publicly announced that Ethan hadn't been selected for college. He explained that I had originally planned to give my spot to Ethan out of goodwill. They said Uncle White's smile was unusually bright that day, in front of everyone. He ridiculed Ethan word by word. It's a good thing Anna Summers decided to keep her hard-earned opportunity instead of wasting it on an ungrateful fool. This incident could have ended there. But I hadn't anticipated Ethan's desperation. He brought Emily with him to confront me. That day, I had just packed fresh tofu into boxes and was about to head out to sell it when Emily blocked my path. She lowered her voice and, with an almost reluctant pout, said, "If you agreed to give Ethan your college spot, I'll step aside and let you two be together." As she spoke, tears welled in her eyes, her face full of grievance and resignation, as if sacrificing herself for Ethan's sake was the ultimate act of love. Ethan, seeing her like that, grew even angrier. He pointed at me and shouted, "Look at how understanding Emily is. And then look at you. You said yes so quickly. Was it just a fight over a college spot?" I'd had enough. Rolling my eyes, I snapped back. "That spot is mine. I earned it. I didn't fight anyone for it." I let out an exasperated sigh and turned to Emily, speaking slowly and deliberately. "I just moved out of his house, and he ran straight to you. A man so fickle isn't worth even a second thought, let alone trading a college spot for. Honestly, even if you gave him to me as a gift, I'd find it disgusting." My blatant disdain seemed to strike a nerve in Ethan. He stared at me, his gaze sharp and probing, as if he had finally realized something. Well, since the secret was already out, it didn't matter if he figured out I had been reborn. I gave him a cold look and said, "Move. Don't block me from making a living." With that, I pushed my cart forward, leaving them both standing in the dust of their shattered illusions. Pushing my tofu cart with all my strength, I rammed it into them, forcing Ethan Walker and Emily Carter to step aside in fear. "What should we do now, Ethan?" Emily whined, clinging to his arm and shaking it dramatically. "Without that college spot, I'm afraid my parents won't agree to us being together." Her voice was syrupy, full of faux grievance. Her wide, tear-filled eyes glancing pitifully at Ethan as though she were enduring a great injustice for his sake. Ethan finally snapped. He lunged forward and grabbed my cart, refusing to let me leave. I struggled to push it past him, but he used even greater force, shoving me backward. His thick brows furrowed with anger, and the hatred in his eyes grew deeper with every passing second. Then, in one swift motion, he overturned my cart. Fresh tofu, straight from the pot, spilled out, dousing me from head to toe. The commotion drew a crowd of onlookers, some of whom recognized me and rushed over to help me up from the pile of ruined tofu. Ethan, completely unbothered by the people around us, stormed up to me, grabbed my collar, and hissed through gritted teeth, "Anna Summers, ruining my life once wasn't enough for you? Now you're trying to destroy me all over again." His voice was low, meant only for me to hear, but it only made me laugh bitterly. I forced myself to stay calm and replied evenly, "That college spot is mine. I earned it fair and square. Why should I give it to you?" Pushing him away, I tried to steady my breathing. Ethan fell silent for 2 seconds, then suddenly smirked. A sinister, knowing smile. "You betrayed me. Anna. He sneered. You dumped me so quickly. Wasn't it because you wanted to run off with your new lover? Everyone on South Alley has seen it. Every night, a man comes to visit you. The lights stay on all night. And he doesn't leave until dawn. Do you think people don't notice what you've been up to? His words made my stomach churn with disgust. Clenching my teeth, I glared at him coldly. Do you think everyone's as shameless as you and Emily? I hadn't planned to make this ugly, but since he had forced my hand, I was ready. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a tape recorder my father had brought back from overseas. Pressing play, I let the recording fill the air. Ethan's voice rang out. I've thought it over. This marriage report can't be submitted. I can't marry you. The crowd fell silent as the recording continued. Ethan froze, panic flashing across his face. He lunged forward, trying to grab the recorder, but before he could reach me, a young man dressed in black appeared with a squad of fully armed soldiers. They pinned Ethan to the ground with ease. The recording played on, Ethan's voice sharp and clear. Let me be honest with you. I've never loved you. I can't marry you out of guilt toward your father. And besides, I don't think I owe your father anything. The words fell like a hammer, and the crowd's mood shifted. Many turned red with anger, their faces twisted with indignation. My father had dedicated over 20 years of his life to this military base, working tirelessly in service. Even if he hadn't achieved great glory, his contributions were undeniable. Now, Ethan not only showed disdain for me, but also dismissed all my father's sacrifices and help. Ethan likely didn't realize the weight of his words. His scorn wasn't just directed at my father. It insulted everyone present. These people, who had all faced life and death struggles, had lost friends and family to their shared cause. His disrespect dishonored both the living and the dead, even though I had long seen through his true nature. Hearing him speak so cruelly still pierced my heart. If my father were still alive, how disappointed he would be. Fortunately, I didn't need to lift a finger. The officers pinning Ethan down were already furious. The young man in black, who seemed to be their leader, ground his teeth and delivered a vicious kick to Ethan's side. You ungrateful bastard, he spat. Do you think anyone could just casually serve alongside Professor Summers? You arrogant fool. When you got into fights and the team wanted to send you back to your village, it was Professor Summers who took pity on you and begged for you to stay. Do you know how many sacrifices he made for you? The officer's voice grew harsher. He even cut his budget, giving up the chance to hire a college assistant, just so you could stay. And you think pouring tea and running errands made you important? Every delicate task in the lab had to be done by Professor Summers himself because of you. I stared at the chaotic scene in front of me. The young officer in black spat angrily at Ethan Walker. You dare say you owe nothing to Professor Summers? You've got some nerve. Tang, one of the other soldiers, chimed in, his tone laced with contempt. Professor Summers was such a kind man. This kid followed him around, eating and drinking like a king, and I used to think the professor must have been rich. Turns out, he was eating plain noodles while telling me not to complain about this kid. Said he needed proper nutrition to grow. What an ungrateful bastard. Tang shook his head in disbelief. If it weren't for Professor Summers' soft heart, how could someone like you ever be worthy of Anna? And now you even have the gall to despise her. Another voice in the crowd added, it's not just about disdain. He wants to wring every last benefit out of Anna. Does he think we're all blind? The accusations flew fast and thick. Everyone looked down on Ethan now. He hadn't expected me to have a recording of his words, let alone that I'd use it. I had only recorded it as a precaution, knowing his nature, but I never thought it would actually come in handy. Now, as the crowd turned on him, Ethan's face turned red with rage. Desperate, he yelled at the young officer. So you're the one sneaking around with her, aren't you? That's why you're defending Anna Summers. The officer rolled his eyes. You're disgusting. Just because your mind is filthy doesn't mean everyone else is. Anna and I stayed up late studying, not whatever nonsense you and Emily Carter get up to. He deliberately glanced disdainfully at Emily, who stood frozen nearby, too scared to even breathe. Following his gaze, the crowd noticed Emily. Someone laughed and said, "Oh, it's her. The one who used to plaster on heavy makeup and loiter around the captain's house, hoping to catch his son's attention." And when that didn't work, she danced in front of the commander's house every day. And now she's stooped to hanging out with Ethan? Weren't you hoping he'd get into college and bring you along? Too bad. Turns out the spot belongs to Anna. Guess you're out of luck now. The crowd's mocking laughter grew louder, and Emily's composure finally cracked. She shot Ethan a furious glare before stomping off. Humiliated, Ethan could only stare after her in stunned silence. He probably couldn't comprehend how his once idealized goddess had turned into such a calculating, shallow person. But I had known Emily's true nature for a long time. In our past life, she hadn't just toyed with Ethan, she had other lovers, too. I had no time to worry about them now. After cleaning up my tofu cart, I boarded the train to school that same day. Though I tried to remain calm, I couldn't shake the lingering fear that Ethan might retaliate and drag me back into the abyss. To ensure my safety, I decided to report to school early. I contacted my professor, who had known my mother and was aware of her contributions to medicine. When I explained my situation and my background in neurology, he agreed to let me work as his assistant for a few days. My mother used to take me to her medical work when I was younger, so I managed to perform decently. Thanks to my recent extensive reading, I had many questions, some of which my professor answered, while others even he couldn't resolve. One day, with a serious expression, he told me, "Our surgical techniques and medical equipment are still far behind. I have high hopes for students like you, but there's only so much you can learn domestically. You should consider studying abroad." He looked at me thoughtfully and added, "Your aunt is overseas, isn't she? Why don't you give her a call?" His words made my heart ache. In my past life, I had completely let my aunt down. I hesitated, feeling guilty, but before I could summon the courage to call her, my professor dialed her number for me. When I answered the phone at his house, my aunt's voice came through like a storm. She scolded me fiercely, demanding to know why I hadn't contacted her. We're each other's only family. How could you just disappear like that? After her tirade, she began to sob, her anger giving way to sorrow. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me help you? In the end, she declared firmly, "I'll handle everything. Tuition, living expenses, whatever you need to study abroad. I'll take care of it." Before hanging up, her tone softened. "Silly girl. I've never planned to marry or have children. My money will all be yours one day. Why would you hesitate to ask me for help?" Her words brought tears to my eyes. Only then did I realize she had no intention of starting a family. In my past life, where had all her money gone? A sudden thought struck me. Ethan's unexpected wealth in that life. It wasn't his own doing. It must have been my aunt's money. But I didn't want to dwell on that now. This life was a clean slate, and I was determined to make the most of it. I ran forward with all my might, determined to leave everything behind. Thankfully, my parents had always planned for me to study abroad and had made sure I learned English. Just a few days after speaking with my aunt, I bought a plane ticket, ready to start a new chapter of my life. At the airport, after carefully checking all my documents, I was about to board when Ethan Walker suddenly appeared. Rushing toward me, he waved a marriage introduction letter from our team at the airport staff and pointed at me, shouting, "This is my wife. We were about to get married, but she stole all my family's money and is trying to flee abroad. You can't let her leave." I glared at him with pure hatred. His goal was obvious. If I became entangled in a civil dispute, I wouldn't be allowed to board. He wanted to ruin my chance to leave the country. The airport staff looked from him to me and said nothing, but one of them reached for my suitcase. In front of everyone, they opened it and rummaged through it, pulling out nothing but clothes. Annoyed, they closed the suitcase, pushed it back toward me, and turned to Ethan. The staff member said coldly, "You claim she stole your family's money. I've checked her belongings, and there's nothing here." Ethan's face twisted in frustration. "There is." I said there is. He shoved the introduction letter toward the staff. "Are you blind? This is solid evidence." Unfazed, the staff member tore the paper from his hand, held it up, and retorted, "This is just an introduction letter. If she's truly your wife, then show us a valid marriage certificate." Ethan's expression darkened, and he pointed angrily at the staff member. "I'll call the police. You'll be held responsible for this." Ignoring him, the staff member leaned closer to me and whispered, "The plane is about to take off. Go ahead and board. Study hard." "Thank you," I whispered back, glancing at him one last time. His small frame stood firmly between me and Ethan, shielding me from further harassment. My chest tightened with emotion, but I turned and boarded the plane quickly. As the plane ascended and the ground grew smaller, I finally felt my heart settle. Looking out the window, I saw the small figure of the staff member still standing there, watching the plane. I clenched my fists and made a silent promise to myself. I would seize every moment to study hard, not just for myself, but for countless other women like me. When I arrived in America, my aunt welcomed me warmly. She had built a comfortable life for herself through her research in finance, and now lived in a sprawling estate. Staying with her, I lacked for nothing and could devote myself entirely to studying medicine. But being in the US also made me realize the stark gap between our medical advancements and those of other countries. This realization didn't discourage me, it motivated me. Coupled with the regrets of my past life, I didn't allow myself to waste even a second. Aside from eating and sleeping, every moment was spent on my studies. The professors I worked with were kind and generous with their knowledge, teaching me without reservation. I worked tirelessly, often losing track of time, and my aunt would occasionally tease me for being a bookworm. But every time my professors praised my progress, she would beam with pride and proudly declare, "She's my niece, inheriting my bloodline." As time passed, my studies became more enjoyable and fulfilling. First, I struggled to understand even the basics, but gradually I gained a deeper grasp of my field. Eventually, I began to approach problems from new angles, tackling challenges that even my professors had never considered. I pushed myself to study harder, avoiding overconfidence, and remained humble in my pursuit of knowledge. I repeatedly revisited the same books, dissecting every detail until I fully understood them. Each time I overcame a surgery that even my professors struggled with, my confidence grew, and my thoughts expanded freely. I started forming my own ideas, engaging in heated yet productive discussions with my professors. Life in America was fulfilling, and my academic progress accelerated rapidly. Occasionally, Mia Bennett would call me from back home to share updates. Through Mia's calls, I had learned a bit about Ethan Walker's current situation. In the early days after I left for the US, life for him in the military had been incredibly difficult. Emily Carter had abandoned him, and the other soldiers treated him like a pariah. Not long after, he left the military entirely. Despite having memories from his past life, Ethan's selfish and ungrateful nature made it impossible for him to thrive among people who valued loyalty and camaraderie. Still, Ethan wasn't without his advantages. Having been reborn, he knew this was a time of rapid economic development. He had seen firsthand the industries that would grow exponentially and threw himself into business. Before long, he struck it big and amassed a considerable fortune. What surprised everyone was that Ethan later sought out Emily Carter, the woman who had discarded him. But to me, it was no shock. In our past life, he had been infatuated with her his entire life. Mia, however, was livid. "Emily's as smug as ever, dropping veiled insults about you in her little circle. Just wait, Anna. Keep studying hard, and one day, you'll put them both to shame." Her indignation made me chuckle, even as it warmed my heart. I assured her that I was focused entirely on my studies. I glanced at the stack of research papers on my desk and exhaled deeply. One day, when I return home, I'll help push medical advancements forward. The lives I could save and improve far outweigh any petty battles with Ethan or Emily. In August, I received a sudden call from the captain, urging me to return. He didn't give many details, only mentioning that it was for someone important. I packed quickly, my aunt offering her usual reminders and advice before I boarded the flight home. I didn't have time to let Mia know I was coming back, deciding instead to surprise her once I arrived. Most of my luggage consisted of gifts for everyone back home. For years had passed since I left. Though I had settled into life abroad, my heart had never stopped longing for my homeland. Upon landing, the captain had sent someone to pick me up. As we hurried toward our destination, our path was blocked by a commotion ahead. A man lay on the ground, seemingly unconscious, while others argued heatedly around him. The man accompanying me was about to step forward to resolve the situation when I recognized a familiar face in the crowd. It was the airport staff member who had helped me board my flight years ago. Without him, I might never have made it out of the country. From their argument, I quickly deduced that the man on the ground was faking an injury, trying to extort money. I stepped forward to examine him and confirmed there was nothing wrong with him. "Who are you to say there's nothing wrong? What gives you the authority?" one of the men shouted angrily, rolling up his sleeves as if to confront me. Before he could act, a nearby police officer produced his badge. I also retrieved my credentials from my bag, calmly introducing myself. "Good afternoon. I specialize in psychiatry and am considered one of the leading experts in my field." After verifying my and the officer's identities, the security team quickly detained the scammers. I turned to the airport worker, who looked just as I remembered. Extending my hand, I said loudly, "Thank you. Truly. Thank you." After a quick goodbye, we left for a private location, heavily guarded and secure. The secrecy made me nervous. Following the captain inside, my heart sank when I saw the person lying on the hospital bed. Tears welled in my eyes. In my previous life, this person had died unexpectedly in this very year. Could I use everything I'd learned to change their fate? I conducted a thorough examination and prepared for the surgery, scheduling it for 3 days later. During that time, I visited the military base, hoping for a joyful reunion with old friends. Instead, as soon as I stepped out of the car, I ran into Ethan Walker. He climbed out of a luxurious car, his tailored suit practically screaming wealth. Our eyes met, and his expression twisted into a smug grin. Well, if it isn't Anna Summers. Didn't you leave for the US? What happened? Couldn't make it? I heard foreigners are pretty exclusive. Did you really think they'd share their core technologies with you? Honestly, I can't tell if you're naive or just stupid." He sauntered over, circling me as his gaze flicked over my professional attire. His tone grew mocking. "You've really spruced yourself up, haven't you? I'll tell you what. For the sake of our marriage in our past lives, if you're willing to behave, I might consider keeping you as my mistress." I had an important person to meet, someone whose fate I might be able to change in this lifetime. My suitcase was packed with carefully chosen gifts for my friends and colleagues, and I couldn't help but imagine Mia's delighted reaction when she received hers. I had no interest in wasting time exchanging words with Ethan Walker, so I brushed past him and headed toward the military base gate. Calling out to the familiar guards at the entrance, I greeted them warmly. They came running over, and Ethan didn't dare make a scene in their presence. I didn't even bother to look back at him. Instead, I handed the gifts to the guards while catching up with them about the changes over the years. We laughed and chatted as we walked further inside, leaving Ethan standing outside, ignored and seething. For some reason, he seemed deeply unsettled by this. His frustration mounted until he suddenly punched the hood of his luxury car in anger. "Anna, you're amazing. This bag, you don't know how many times I've dreamed of owning it. It was so expensive I never dared to buy it. And now you've given it to me," Mia exclaimed, hugging the designer bag as if it were a treasure. She then pulled me into a tight embrace, planting exaggerated kisses on my cheeks. "Actually," she teased, "you should keep it for yourself. Why are you still using that plain cloth bag? You should carry something that matches your status. You can't let Ethan or Emily look down on you now that you're back." I smiled calmly. I already ran into Ethan at the gate earlier. He's making money now and seems quite pleased with himself, but I'm not worried about what he or Emily thinks. I chose not to tell her the insulting things Ethan had said, not wanting to upset her. Instead, I reassured her that my return was for important work and that the police would be accompanying me when necessary. Because of the confidentiality surrounding the person I was here to see, I didn't share any details with Mia. The next few days were spent catching up with Mia. I told her about my life abroad, and she shared stories about her recent years. Time flew by, and the day of the surgery arrived. Mia and I wandered around the base in the morning, enjoying each other's company, while she excitedly pointed out how much the area had developed. We were in the middle of an animated conversation when Emily Carter suddenly appeared, arm in arm with Ethan. "So, Anna Summers, what brings you back? Couldn't make it abroad?" Emily smirked, her lips painted in a bold red. Her meticulously curled hair framed a face full of shrewdness, poorly concealed beneath layers of heavy makeup. Ethan, dressed in an expensive imported suit, had his hair slicked back with too much gel. His polished shoes gleaming. Standing together, they looked every bit the picture of wealth and ambition. I grabbed Mia's hand, intending to walk around them, but they deliberately blocked our path. As immovable as a wall, time was running out, and the surgery couldn't be delayed. I looked Ethan straight in the eye and said, "I have a critical surgery to perform today. I don't have time for this. If you want to mock me, I'll gladly set aside time for you on the day I leave." "A critical surgery?" Ethan let out a mocking laugh. "Are you going to tell me they specially flew you back from abroad for this surgery? Do you expect me to believe that?" His eyes were filled with disdain. "After all, you were my wife once. And in my eyes, you've always been nothing more than a useless housewife. Sure, you might be decent at housework, but do you really think a woman like you can compete with men in the medical field? Stop pretending you're so important." He crossed his arms, spreading his legs as if to block my way completely. "I won't let you leave today. Let's see if you're really as important as you claim." I couldn't believe the absurdity of the situation. After everything I had achieved, how could I let Ethan Walker stop me now? Keeping my composure, I said firmly, "This surgery concerns someone extremely important. If it's delayed, not even all the money you've earned will be enough to settle the consequences. You can insult me all you want, Ethan, but today, I must leave." I couldn't let personal grievances delay something so critical. Swallowing my pride, I lowered my tone to plead with Ethan Walker, but even then, he refused to relent. "Anna Summers, I already told you. I don't believe you," he sneered, pointing at me. "How could an ignorant woman like you ever achieve anything in medicine? You're actually claiming to surpass others in the field? What a joke." I couldn't afford to wait any longer. Cold sweat covered my back as I glanced around desperately. Finally, I grabbed a wooden stick from the ground and swung it at Ethan's shoulder with all my strength. Having no experience in this sort of thing, my attempt didn't knock him out. Instead, it enraged him further. He yanked the stick from my hands and, without hesitation, struck my arm with it. "So, you're saying you're off to perform surgery? Let's see how you manage that with a broken arm." Ethan spat venomously, raising the stick again, preparing to strike me once more. Before he could, Mia Bennett threw herself over me to shield me. At the same moment, the captain arrived, accompanied by the guards of the important person I was meant to help. "Quick, we still have time to make it," one of the guards urged. Seeing the state of my arm, one of them asked hesitantly, "Can you still perform the surgery?" I nodded firmly. "Please trust me." As we left, the captain clenched his teeth, glaring at Ethan with murderous intent. "You'd better hope the surgery succeeds, or I'll tear you apart limb by limb," he growled before we departed. Ethan's earlier arrogance vanished when he saw the guard. He shrank back, not daring to say another word. Performing surgery had become second nature to me. As familiar as eating or drinking, I wasn't pushing through on sheer willpower but relying on the skills and confidence I had honed through countless procedures. Though the pain in my arm flared with every movement, I focused all my energy on the scalpel in my hand. Minutes turned into hours, and all I could hear was the clinking of surgical instruments. In my past life, I never would have dared to dream of being entrusted with such an operation. Yet here I was, performing surgery on a person of immense importance. The sense of fulfillment and happiness was overwhelming, driving me to cherish this opportunity even more. Finally, I began the sutures. This procedure, deemed impossible by others in the country, was one I had rehearsed countless times. When I laid down the scalpel, I silently told myself, the surgery was a success. Excited voices soon confirmed it. "The surgery was a success," one exclaimed. Murmurs of disbelief and astonishment rippled from outside the operating room. I took a deep breath, looking at the face of the person on the operating table. For the first time, I truly believed I had changed someone's fate. When I stepped out of the operating room, I was met with a standing ovation. Tears welled in my eyes. In my past life, I had never been respected, but in this life, through my own efforts, I had earned the admiration of people I once thought were beyond my reach. I smiled genuinely, feeling a profound sense of pride. The next time I saw Ethan Walker was in prison. The important figure I had operated on didn't bother dealing with someone as insignificant as him. But those who respected that figure certainly did. Ethan's company was thoroughly investigated, and what they uncovered was shocking. During the early stages of his business, Ethan had committed countless crimes, including endangering lives. He had thought that being reborn would allow him to cover up his past, and it might have, if he hadn't gone out of his way to provoke me. Anna Summers, I never expected you, a clueless housewife, to actually become a top-tier doctor, Ethan said with a bitter smile. Being a housewife is no easy feat either. I replied calmly, but you never acknowledged my hard work or the sacrifices I made. It's too late to say these things now, he murmured. His voice softened, tinged with regret. Anna, in my last life, not being able to marry Emily Carter was my greatest regret. But now, looking back, I realize how ridiculous I was. I looked at him curiously, waiting for him to continue. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. I heard about her. About how she had other lovers behind my back. I wasn't surprised. In our previous life, Ethan Walker had known about Emily Carter's other lovers too, but his love had romanticized her flaws. Anna Summers, you shouldn't be so cold to me, Ethan suddenly shouted, his voice filled with desperation. But to me, he and Emily were now nothing more than irrelevant figures, and my tone remained calm, devoid of emotion. When I cared about you like a madwoman, you didn't care about me. Now that I've grown indifferent, you can't seem to handle it. I replied flatly. Do you know why I couldn't leave you alone? He asked. I'm not particularly interested, I said, keeping my gaze steady. Because I wanted to prove something, to prove that I wasn't wrong. Even though I knew Emily Carter was a calculating woman, I still married her and pretended we were happy. I couldn't admit that you leaving me might make you better off. So I clung to you, trying to block your path forward. Ethan's voice cracked as he continued. But now, I realize how completely wrong I was. I listened to his confession with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. Then, without a trace of emotion, I asked, in our previous life, did you take my aunt's inheritance for yourself? He burst into tears and nodded, confirming my suspicions. Finally, I couldn't hold back my anger any longer. Ethan Walker, you truly are a hypocrite through and through, I shouted. With that, I turned and walked away without looking back. Emily Carter, who had shielded Ethan from the law's scrutiny, eventually faced legal consequences herself. As for me, I looked toward the future, ready to lead the country's medical advancements to even greater heights.